I'm Newt Gingrich, and I want to thank Matt Walter and the RSLC for giving me this chance to chat with you about the Lessons Learned project that we worked with the RSLC and the RNC, and frankly all the major Republican organizations. We went back and looked at the elections of 2012, 2014, and 2015. And what we were looking for were signs of success, things that could work. There were a tremendous number of examples at the state level where again and again we were reaching out, building majorities people didn't expect, and we are today stronger in state legislators than any time in the history of the Republican Party, going all the way back to our founding in 1854. And a lot of the times that's been the next marginal seat held by an African American, an Asian American, or a Hispanic American. And so we really represented a broader party than we used to be, and a party that has, I think, an opportunity this year in the middle of tremendous turmoil to win historic results. And let me be clear, I'm not automatically optimistic. I'm not automatically telling you things are going to work. I first ran for Congress in 1974 in the middle of Watergate, and I lost. I then ran for Congress in 1976 with Jimmy Carter at the head of the Democratic ticket in Georgia, and I lost. I only won my third race in 1978, and then I helped Ronald Reagan in 1980, and I had decided to tackle the project of creating a House Republican majority. Well, we lost in 80, 82, 84, 86, 88, 90, and 92. So when we finally did the contract with America and won a majority in 94, I'd been at it a long time. I spent 16 years in the minority. The whole party had been in the minority in the House for 40 years by the time we finally won. So I've seen tough years, I've seen good years. I think right now we're at the cusp of this being an opportunity year. If things break the right way, if we follow the right patterns, we're going to have a great election. We're in fact going to elect a president, increase our position in the Senate, increase our position in the House, do remarkably well at the state level, and as a result, be in a position to develop new approaches to governing, new approaches to solving problems. So we really worked very hard with Reince Priebus's leadership at the RNC and with Matt Walter's leadership at the RSLC to develop a deeper, better understanding. I'm going to use a little bit of a cheat sheet. I actually, all of you are being given a copy of the Lessons Learned project, and as you know, it has, I think, some 20 suggestions, and I'm not capable of just memorizing all those, so I'm going to use a little bit of a cheat sheet. We started with a key idea, which is that words and ideas matter. Take, for example, the rise of Trump. You can agree or disagree with him. He certainly used Facebook and Twitter and cable television and all these other devices really well. But he also had very specific messages. You might agree with the messages or disagree, but they were very vivid, and they reached a very substantial number of Republicans and a substantial number of conservatives. And what we discovered when we went back and looked at the races that really mattered, for example, in Maryland we won the governor's race by a much bigger margin than anybody thought possible. Well, Larry Hogan had figured out what the state wanted was relief on taxes, that the Democrats had raised taxes again and again and again. They taxed virtually everything. And so whatever questions he was asked, he'd immediately go back and talk about taxes. And he had a very narrowly focused, very deliberate campaign on that one concept of taxes. And people came to believe he was sincere, and it was an issue they cared about. And so his concept of reducing the size of government, reducing the cost of government so we could lower your taxes, suddenly took a state that is a blue state, and he won this very substantial victory because he had a message that mattered. So we think, first of all, that you need to recognize two parts to this. The wrong words, if you get sloppy, if you get yourself in a fight that you can't win, the wrong words can kill your campaign. To give you a Democratic example, the Democratic candidate for the Senate in Iowa went to Texas and spoke to a Texas trial lawyers group, made fun of having a farmer as the chair of the Finance Committee in the Senate, I'm sorry, the Judiciary Committee in the Senate. He was talking, of course, about Chuck Grassley, who's only the most popular politician in Iowa. So in one smartphone copy, somebody in that group videoed him as he talked. And they got him saying things about Chuck Grassley and about farmers and about trial lawyers that were devastating. He never recovered because in Iowa people thought, let me get this straight, you're against farmers, we're a huge farming state, you're against Chuck Grassley, we all love Chuck Grassley, and you're telling trial lawyers in Texas you're going to take care of trial lawyers. Well, that was 3 strikes and he was out. He never recovered. So the first thing to remember is that the wrong words can cripple your campaign or can kill your candidacy. And think about the notion that wherever you speak nowadays, people have smartphones that you can be taped or videoed anywhere. So there's no place where you can say, well, I'm going to be off the record here. And I have a pretty firm rule. I'm almost never off the record with any reporter because I just assume, or in any speech, I just assume they'll get out. We also think that it's important to recognize as you're out recruiting people that the internet, YouTube, the fact that people are in, they're on your living room all the time now. I mean, you see candidates very close up. It actually makes the candidate more important than ever. So recruiting quality candidates, recruiting people who are attractive in the media, people who are articulate, people, and it's not a question about being pretty or ugly or whatever. All of you know there are folks who just feel right. They feel right in a cocktail party. They feel right giving a speech. They feel right shaking hands at the grocery store. The candidate actually is now more important than ever because and we saw this, for example, with Jeb Bush, who's a terrific guy, an old friend of mine, raised a huge amount of money, but he couldn't, as a candidate, communicate directly in a way that his advertising could reinforce. And the result was that he actually lost ground because people said, wait a second, if you've raised that much money, you ought to be a lot stronger than you are. So good candidates ultimately raise money. Lots of money without a good candidate is just a waste. And so candidates, I think, are actually more important than they used to be. One of the most important things Republicans have to learn, and this is really at the heart of much of what we're trying to do, is that demography is not destiny. Demography is opportunity. Let me explain what I mean by that. There are all sorts of liberals who want to say, gee, as the country becomes less white, it's going to become less Republican. Well, 50 years ago, the average Irish voter and the average Italian voter was a Democrat. Today, they're Republicans. Now, they didn't change their national identity or their background in terms of where their families came from. But over time, they migrated to the Republican Party. They were alienated by the Democrats. 50 years ago, most white Southerners were Democrats. Now they're overwhelmingly Republican. They didn't give up being white Southerners. They just found that the Democratic Party had repudiated them. The marginal vote by which the Republicans took control in West Virginia for the first time since 1920 in the West Virginia House was an African-American woman voting as a Republican. In California, we've begun to winning a whole series of races, and the RSLC deserves a lot of credit for this because we have been really actively recruiting Asian Americans. And we won a whole series of races now in California with Asian American candidates. When you go out and you actively recruit and you actively engage, and I want to draw a distinction between the traditional Republican model of outreach and what I believe in, which is inclusion. Outreach is when 5 white guys have a meeting and then call you. Inclusion is when you're in the meeting. I would urge every one of you, look at the demography of your district, or if you're a statewide leader, look at the demography of the districts that you want to win. And start designing a schedule and an organizational pattern that includes all those folks. In one of the key races in Colorado, Mike Kaufman, who was supposed to be one of the closest races in the country, won it by a big margin, getting reelected to the House. The last Sunday before the election, he was in 4 different Ethiopian Christian churches in his district. Now, you would never have thought of Colorado as a center of Ethiopian Christian churches, but it is. In Minnesota, there may be 125,000 Somali Americans who are eager to have an opportunity to join a party of work, a party that believes in upward mobility, a party that wants their children to have a better future. You go around place by place. John Kasich got 26% of the African American vote running for re-election in Ohio because he worked for it, he asked for it, he reached out and talked to people. Senator Cornyn actually carried a plurality of Latinos in Texas running for re-election. All of these things are doable. We have to see the gradual demographic changes in America as an opportunity for us to offer everybody a better future, to offer everybody a chance, which the Democrats can't match. They can't take on the teachers' unions to make sure children get better education. They can't take on the Washington bureaucrats to make sure we have better job creation and more small business. They can't take on their own bureaucracies. You know, take Baltimore as an example. The last Republican city councilman was elected in Baltimore in 1942. Now that's an opportunity for us to go in there and say, look, you've had one group in charge for 74 years, and they have failed. So if you want to stick with the failure, vote with them. But if you'd like a chance for your children to be physically safe, you'd like a chance for your children to go to a school where they learn, you'd like a chance to have a job in your neighborhood, vote for us. So look around at the demography in your area and think of it as an opportunity to create new friends and new approaches. This gives you an introduction to what I think is a lot of material. There are a number of other items in the paper. I want to urge you to read the entire paper. I want to ask you to share it with your fellow Republicans back home. And I want you to ask you to let Matt and the RSLC know, what would you improve? What do you disagree with? What do you think we missed? Because we'd like to work with you to have an even better view of this. I think it's a start towards designing a very effective fall campaign. And I look forward to working with you to make this a very victorious year.